morning, everybody, and welcome to Bolivia Political Crossroads. Today is Saturday, March 13th, 2021, episode number 55, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
Does that sound right to you, Ernesto? Good morning.
Good. Yeah, good morning, Paul. How are you doing?
Good, I'm good, all things considered. We're going to do this show in English. According to custom, we try to alternate, right?
Right.
Things have gotten pretty serious, I guess, in the last 48 hours. To give some background to our international audience that might not follow things as closely here. Last Sunday, we had the local elections. When I say local, I mean elections for mayor and for governor. And that was the case for all 9, well, for the whole country, right? In which the MAS party did not fare so well. It's important to, I think, give a summary before going into their topics. In terms of governorships, is that a word? Governorships?
Yeah,
okay. So far, the MAS has taken only 3 of 9. There will be a runoff in 4 different departments: La Paz, Chuquisaca, Pando, and Tarija. But considering the numbers, them winning runoffs, at least from where I stand, the only one that seems probable to me is La Paz, where they have a pretty fair chance of winning. As things stand, in going into the capital cities and El Alto, which isn't a capital city, but it's the 3rd largest in the country, so it's worth mentioning. The MAS only won in 2, in Sucre and in Oruro. And in those cities, by margins that were tiny. And we've talked about this before. For the governorships, there's runoffs, right? Exactly. Just like in the presidential election. In the mayors, in the races for mayor, there is no runoff. It's just whoever gets the most votes wins, no matter the margin. So where the MAS won in Sucre and in Oruro, in Sucre they won by 0.2%, a matter of a couple hundred votes. And in Oruro is just over close to 1.5%. So they've definitely lost ground in municipal elections, at least in the major cities and in the departments. No, my takeaway, Ernesto, from this, in summary, before I let you speak on this. Obviously, this reinforces the rift there is between rural and urban populations, because if you look at the municipalities outside of the urban areas, the MAS takes most of them, right? I mean, even in Santa Cruz, I saw a headline that said that there were 10 municipalities in Santa Cruz where the MAS won with 100% of the votes.
My God, yeah.
Yeah.
That's beyond reality. That's beyond reality.
Yeah. Whether that's all legitimate or not, but I mean, if that's able to happen through whether coercion or whatever, then it says something. The poor performance overall of the MAS candidates definitely shows, at least, that I think there's definitely some discontent. I think it could be a reflection of, Arce has only been in office, Luis Arce, the president has only been in office since January, but January, February, what's basically a month and a half. That's not a lot of time. I don't know, but I suspect that perhaps part of the poor performance is due to a discontent with his administration, poor choice of candidates, At least with talking about poor choice of candidates, my final point or takeaway with this is that, man, what a screw up on the MAS's part with Eva Copa and El Alto, no? The votes are almost totally counted, and looks like she's going to take about 70%, with the MAS candidate, Maquera, getting somewhere around 20%. What this indicates to me as well, at least what I get out of this with the case of Eva Copa, is that it shows unquestionable, I don't know if animosity and a grudge that's being held against her. All signs pointed to her winning. And this is a case of, there's a saying in English, I don't know if you can translate it to Spanish. I think I thought of a translation. You can tell me if it's correct later, after, I'm not gonna say that on the cameras. It's rather vulgar. And but anyway, it's a case of Evo Morales biting off his nose to spite his face. Have you heard that before?
Yeah, right.
And anyway, I think this is a perfect example of that. They would have been much smarter to go with Eva Copa than with Maquera. And I think that Evo was probably behind this decision. As a leader, he's the leader of the MAS party still, right?
Right.
And the reasons being that she was not, this is my theory, she was not under any circumstances supposed to broker a deal to allow Añez to assume the presidency. And that kind of, I don't have anybody connections behind the scenes or anything, but I don't think that was in the MAS's plans. and I don't think she'll ever be forgiven for that. So that's the way I look at it. And some final comments, just in terms of the elections themselves, and for people who aren't here, that there have been a lot of reports of lack of order. The electoral, what do you call them? The jurados that are supposed to manage the voting tables or the votings. A lot of them didn't show up, or they didn't show up on time. The vote count has been extremely slow. In Santa Cruz, we won't know until, looks like we'll know by the end of today, but it's been almost a week, who the mayor is in Santa Cruz. But regardless, it's not anybody from the MAS. So just to clear that up, it hasn't been declared officially, but it's between two candidates who are not Masistas. And strangely, Salvador Romero, during all of this, decides to take a trip to Honduras before his work is done here, as an overseer or a consultant for elections in Honduras. That seems extremely odd to me. But anyway, I'll leave it there and let you pick up.
Okay. Yeah. No, I think you mentioned both issues here, which are the important issues. One, we are in the middle still of an election, because we don't know the results, so we're in the middle of the proceedings of an election, and that in itself is a political event. It's the most. It should have been the most important political event, because that's power. Elections are power, and the distribution of power in Bolivia will go through changes, because power will be distributed differently after the recount is finished, and that's something that the MAS probably doesn't like very much, because, as you mentioned, they are behind, and they're losing many elections in the municipal elections and in the gubernatorial elections. Well, let's see how they fare in the runoffs, but still they're not doing good anywhere, especially in the urban areas. Mm-hmm. That's on the one hand. But in the middle of this event, which is the most important event, a second event takes place yesterday, and it is the apprehension of a number of people that were part of the government until, well, by the way, and I know that it's hard to remember this by memory, because usually the sequence of presidents in Bolivia starts in January and ends 5 years later in January. But this time it has been different.
I don't know about usually.
Yeah,
but, but it's supposed to be that way.
It's supposed to be that way. Well, it's that way since Evo became president on January of 2006. Right. Before January 2006, it used to be the 6th of August. And that has been the date for many, many years, 6th of August, because it's the national
Bolivian independence.
Yeah, it's the Bolivian Independence Day. So it was pretty natural. That was the date that was instituted with democracy. And the democracy has been working in Bolivia since 1983. So 6th of August has been the date of change until Evo became president in 2006. And well, that was it. And then it became 22nd or 23rd of every January. That's when the change of presidency took place. But in this case, it was different because Jeanine lost the presidency in an election. And there was sort of a hurry because there was a transitional government, and I guess nobody was willing to wait until January, and that the change of government took place on the 8th of November. So actually, Lucho has been in government for almost 4 months. I mean, November, December, January, yeah, almost 4 months. So. But that's not the point. The point is that these guys decided.
It was in November that he took office.
Yeah, he took office in November.
Okay, thank you for that correction.
He took office in.
Yeah, I was counting from late January.
January.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you. So yeah,
he took office on the 8th of November. And but this is an important point because it's not just an analysis of the dates. Apart from the fact that they didn't fare good in the elections, in the municipal elections, in the gubernatorial elections, there was a lot of criticism until yesterday to Arce's government because purportedly they didn't do good in terms of initiating processes against what they call the golpistas, the people that did
that participated in the coup.
On the coup of 2019. So, and especially they were very hard on the minister of the minister of government, because the implication was that he was just negligent, or if not negligent, his situation was put into question because for some unexplainable reason he wasn't doing enough. So he did yesterday. He did enough. He jailed the former president of Bolivia, which was Jeanine Añez, and he did it himself. He didn't just let the police do it. He went with the police and
all the way to Trinidad.
Yeah, he grabbed her. I don't know where because they never say where it was. You know,
it was outside the city. She wasn't at her house in the city.
Yeah,
she didn't say where. At 1:30 in the morning.
At 1:30 in the morning. So. And he did it himself. So he was acting as a policeman yesterday. The minister of government became a policeman for some hours until he grabbed Mrs. Jeanine Añez. So with that, he can remain as minister of government for we don't know how long, but that was his report card yesterday. He got an A+. So he can remain on his job.
Today it was at 1:30 in the morning.
Yeah, it was today. Right. So. The question is why this happened. One of the interpretations is the one that you just mentioned, is because they were doing so bad in the results of the municipal and gubernatorial elections that they were trying to do something, revindicate. I mean, do something that would be worthwhile for them politically. So they undertake all this process and they do it. In order to satisfy the Masista extremists, especially. That's one interpretation, which is respectable because it's logical. It has logic. I think this was exposed, this line of thought was exposed by Samuel yesterday and last night, because he was interviewed, and I wasn't content with his logic.
Samuel Doria Medina.
Yeah, because Samuel Doria Medina usually has, I don't know, I'm pretty seldom in agreement with him because he just sees certain aspects of the things. He doesn't tend to be holistic does a holistic analysis of the whole thing. He just does specific aspects of it. And last night he was the one that exposed this point of thought, of thinking. He said this is because of the results of the election.
No, I'm not. But when I say that, I don't think it's the entire reason. Right. I think it was convenient. They've been planning this for since Arce won the election.
No, this is a very good. It's good.
But the timing is convenient because everybody's distracted by the slow vote counts, and nobody knows who's mayor in Santa Cruz, and they're very close races. There can be runoffs, so people are distracted by that.
But see, that's your clarifying is very important. But Samuel didn't clarify that. You know, he concentrated on the election results, and I think that's just a fallacy because by no means that's true. When I say by no means it's true, is I analyze this result from the time Evo was in Mexico City, not even in Buenos Aires. You know, he mentioned it in many occasions that there was a big mistake done during his term of office, and it's that he didn't take the precautions for an uproar of the people of the country. And that his implication was that, I don't know if you remember, but one time he said that if he ever got back into government, he would conform and own his own army,
malicious,
Red Army or whatever. Yeah, he did say it. He did say it. That,
yes, he did.
And he made the comparison with the people in Venezuela, because the Venezuelans have their own army there. You know, it's a parallel instrument to the armed forces in Venezuela. So he did mention it, and not only in one occasion, a couple or three times he did mention it, Evo. So this is in Evo's mind for a long time because he knew that a big mistake had been undergone in October 2019, because that's unpardonable for a revolutionary with a Marxist mind. It just can't happen, you know. If one analyzes Marx and his behavior of history, you know, it's anti-historic what happened here in 2019, because history doesn't go back. It's, you know, first you have the slave situation, the slave life stage of history. Then you have the second stage, which is after slavery. I don't recall the name of it, but it's not yet the democracy. And then comes democracy, the republic comes on, then comes democracy. But that's a farce because that's when all the exploitation of people takes place. And then finally people illuminate, and then comes the socialist stage. And after the socialist stage comes the communist stage, when there's no state, the withering of the state. That was in Marxist terminology. So for a Marxist, there's no way you can't go back. You know, it's not like the revolution comes and then you go back to capitalism. No, it has to advance. So for him, it was an ideological detour, which was unprecedented in history for him, and it just couldn't have happened. And two, it was a political bad performance because it showed that he was a bad revolutionary. A good revolutionary would never allow this to happen, you know, because that's why the Soviets had the Red Army, and during the Stalin era, they had all these people spying on their neighbors, on their family, and it was just because the revolution had to take care of itself, and the revolution couldn't be dethroned, you know, from government. So he was he had this bad feeling, and he mentioned it. He mentioned it in different occasions. So, and then he said, you know, that they were going to do their own army. And a couple of days ago, I watched a video that was going through some on WhatsApp. I watched it, and it was Mr. De La Quintana speaking in some Marxista forum, you know. But again, you know, yeah, it's
right-hand man of Evo.
It sounds funny when you're not a Marxista, you know, because it sounds ridiculous. But first, it was a very logical explanation. You know, the way he explains this it's not something that comes out of his mind that moment, you know, it's something that he has been thinking profoundly upon, and that he's been elaborating all these theories for a long time. And basically, you know, it's the fact that, you know, there is an imperialism right now in the world, you know. And he says the British have declared that they were in the coup d'etat of 2019, and this was a demonstration that they're still imperialists because they want our lithium. And then he pointed his finger to the Germans, and everybody is getting into Bolivia. So I think that the MAS has elaborated a theory, a political theory around which, you know, they want to put into the correct rails the revolution and destroy everything that has been anti-revolutionary. And that means destroying the former government and jailing all the policemen and all the people from the armed forces that were involved in that process. And just like Stalin, you know, Stalin used to do that, you know, during 60 years, he jailed everybody and he killed everybody, you know.
No, they're trying to erase history and rewrite it.
Right.
So it's rather terrifying.
To me, that is very terrifying, because I think that's exactly what is happening. That's what they want to happen, you know. Now, if you ask me if I think they're going to triumph, I don't know if they're going to triumph, but that's what they're trying to do, and this is what they're looking at. And this, see, but they have a script. The opposition doesn't have a script.
Exactly. Yes.
They have a script, and they go by the script. You know, when you have a script in life, you have to do better, because at least you know where you're going, you know. If you deviate for a while, that's just a deviation, but the script is written there, you know. And whereas the opposition doesn't have a script, you know, they're just playing the democracy card, and when there are elections, they think that they're in a normal situation, in a normal country where democracy reigns, and it doesn't matter whether there are 1,000 candidates for each post. It doesn't matter, you know, because we are Democrats and we have to hear everybody. So, yeah, we are reading a different Bolivia. Each one is reading a different Bolivia, and that's worrisome, because the only people that really do have a good political and solid script are the Masistas, you know, and they're heading to where they want to go. They're heading to Evo Morales getting back in government, not Lucho Añez. You know, they know that Lucho Añez is just, yeah, he is really a transitorial president in Bolivia for them, you know. And I don't know when the decision is going to be made. I don't know if they're going to wait 5 years in order to have another election and have Evo return. I'm not sure of that, because when I read their theory, you know, I just foresee that the theory is going to come to a point in which they're going to say everything that happened from October 10th of 2019 is just void and null. It doesn't happen. It wasn't supposed to happen, you know, because the real leader of the revolution is Evo Morales, and anything beyond that or away from that is just non-existent. So the leader should be Evo Morales again, because that was anti-historic, anti-revolutionary. And I don't know, maybe in 9 months or a year, they're going to reach the conclusion. And the first one on reaching the conclusion will probably be Luis Arce. And he'll say, yes, you know, I am just here as a transitory president, and I have to hand this post to the real leader of the revolution, who has won, I don't know how many elections, and with 60% of the votes. And please come, Evo, and have a seat in where you belong.
Right, because there's some inconsistencies and incoherencies in where this is headed until now. Luis Arce, since day one, since he took office, before he took office, he wasn't doing it. He was more cautious. But once he became president legally, the rhetoric has been the de facto government of Jeanine Añez, and the military, civic-military coup. And every time he's speaking publicly anywhere for any event and any occasion, he makes sure he uses those terms at least once, and he's trying to force this into the collective psyche, right? The problem here is, well, there's a couple of problems. If that's the case, who called the elections that he won? Those elections couldn't have taken place or shouldn't be legitimate elections, and he couldn't be president on one hand. On the other hand, if he plays out if he goes through his 5-year term, in Bolivia, there's re-election. And here and anywhere in the world, generally, if there's the opportunity to be reelected, the sitting president takes that opportunity and runs
Right.
again. And
Right.
it would be awfully strange, or at least awkward, for him not to do so, unless he had some really good excuse. And it also calls into a question of self-dignity. I mean, oh no, I'm not going to run because Evo can do a better job than I can, or he should do it. It's really sticky, and I don't know a better term. It definitely puts him in a bind. And what you're saying is, what you just said is, I think, probably more coherent, and it also almost seems more likely that at some point the MAS is going to come to some kind of, I don't know, agreement, or they're going to put something into motion where Lucho Arce is going to say, you know what, I'm just here, I'm just passing through, and we need to. The way I see it playing out is calling new elections early and letting Evo run, because in the meantime there's been 2 presidents, so Evo can run again, right? It's a mess.
If you position the idea that there was a coup, then who belongs to the presidency?
Mm-hmm.
And the natural answer to that is the president that was the victim of the coup,
Mm-hmm.
right? If there's a coup, that's the natural leader. Somebody was overthrown, he's the leader. Whatever happened afterwards, even if there was an election, the election cannot have legality or political validation, because Evo was not a candidate, and he, in order for this whole theatrical politics, Evo should have been a candidate, because he's the natural leader of the Masistas and of the whole country. So since he wasn't a candidate there, then those elections are meaningless also, because he was supposed to be because during the coup, he was the candidate.
Mm-hmm.
So he was overthrown when he was the sitting president and the candidate for the re-election. And he was a legal candidate for re-election because the Constitutional Tribunal had approved his candidacy. So the whole argumentation towards returning him to power has logic if you look at it from their perspective. And if they insist on this whole philosophy, they will reach the moment in which they will say, well, stop, this isn't going anywhere. The leader of this whole movement is Evo Morales. It's not Luis Arce. So let's do something to put things straight, how they should be. And that's a Marxist position, because the revolution is one. It's not 2 revolutions. There's no democratic revolution in Marxist theory. It's just the revolution, right? It's the proletariat that overtakes power, and it's either the dictatorship or the proletariat is part of the Marxist theory. So they're not too worried about the niceties of democracy and the theories of democratic theory of democratic politics. Yeah, I'm very worried about that, and that's something that I have to say. Samuel never looks at things, because it's not the first time. He tends to look at fragments. He looks the whole picture, but fragments of it. And so far, he's been doing good, because he wasn't jailed, and he defended himself. And even in the worst times in Bolivian politics during Evo Morales, he had this trials, and he was able to not being jailed. So that was a success from his part. But still, I think he misses the big point. And the big point here is that Bolivia, as Cuba, as Venezuela, as Nicaragua is part of a revolution. This is not a process of democracy. Democracy has been installed in Bolivia on October 2019 because the people brought it back and they wanted to breathe democracy, and they pushed for an election. They had the election and they lost the election, true, but they lost under their terms, under democratic terms. And now they have the second election, which was the subnational elections, and they won, but they won under a democratic rules of game. But now it's again, you know, this is the bipolarity in Bolivia. On the one hand, you have all the Democrats, and that's the opposition because they truly believe in a democracy. And on the other hand, you have the revolutionary, which are the Marxists. They don't believe in democracy. They play democracy because they can't only play the revolution, you know. If you cannot do the revolution as it was written by Marx or by Lenin, then you have to play by ear, whatever the other people want to hear for a moment, you know, until you take power, really, you know, until you really take power, like the Soviets took it in 1917, or the Cubans took it from 1959 on, or when the Venezuelans took it in the 80s, you know. So, and the Nicaraguans for decades, you know. So it's just a matter of being able to do it. And I think that the MAS, it's not that they are Democrats or they want to see how this works in Bolivia. They don't believe in democracy. I don't think they ever believed in the process in them, but they have no other choice because it's hard to install the revolutionary process as it had happened in those other countries, because you have a whole region like Santa Cruz, you know, which is very big, you know. It's not a joke. Santa Cruz, in terms of population and in terms of territory, Santa Cruz is bigger than most European countries, just Santa Cruz. Territorially, it's bigger than most European countries. And in terms of population, it's just like La Paz. So, you know, you can't have a revolution with half of Bolivia
with that counterpart.
Right. That's why in 2009, there was the supposed separation, the secessionist movement. Purportedly, there was a secessionist movement, because if you cannot undergo a revolution because half of the country doesn't want it, then the other half that doesn't want it may take another route, which is the separation. And this is what happened in 2009, 2008, 2009. So that's when the judicial trial started against the leaders of Santa Cruz. So it's a complicated game, and I think we're still in that game. I think Bolivia is still in that game. It's not a democratic game. It's a fight between democracy and a socialist revolutionary on the Cuban style. The difference is that the Cubans, when they won the revolution, they won in the whole island. And when Chavez won his revolution, they won in the whole country. In Bolivia, in Nicaragua, the same thing, because it's a much smaller country. They just won the whole thing. The Ortegas and company won the whole thing, and that was it, you know. But in Bolivia, it's not playing. It's not as simple as that, you know. Even if they win an election, they can't win the whole country because a good part of the country is not with them.
But it seems strange, and it seems strange and unnecessary to me. Here's the thing. Sorry to cut you off. The elections in October 2020 that Luis Arce won, he won with 55%. Carlos Mesa was a distant second with, he didn't even make it to 30, 27 or 26.
Right.
And so why do, you know, I'd argue against you in the sense that they can do this, at least on a national level, democratically, you know, through clean elections, because
but it's a good discussion. And I mean, I want to hear
Luis Arce was a terrible candidate, first of all.
Yeah. He
still won with 55% of the vote. He won without the tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars that Evo's government illegally used to finance campaigning and publicity for his reelection, right? In 2019 and in previous elections. Okay, it's no secret that Evo and the MAS and his government were spending millions, tens of millions, if not hundreds, over the course of 14 years on propaganda to win elections. Luis Arce didn't have that, and he still took 55%. And so what I'm getting at here is that they don't need to pull all these dirty tricks and rewrite history. And it's a shame that they're doing it. You know, I mean, the facts are clear in terms of how things played out between 2016, when Evo lost the referendum, that would have made an exception to allow him to not for a third term, for a fourth term, because his third term, you know, there's arguments that could be made that his third term was acceptable when the Constitution allows for 2 consecutive terms. And from that point forward, I mean, it's very clear. He made a huge mistake in not looking for a successor. That's what I think is, you know, that in what's his Julio Aliaga we had on, who made it a very valid point that everything, if you don't look at this whole, I don't know how you call it, fiasco in this whole mess that we're in right now, everything started in February of 2016 when Evo lost the referendum and then decided not to respect those results. Because had he chosen a successor, I don't think they would have had any issues. And this would have kept going, even with Luis Arce, who's a terrible candidate, and without any of the money, you know, the backing his campaign that they had when they had access to the government coffers. But they don't seem to be having any problems. You know, they don't care about winning municipal and departmental elections, because that's not where the real power is. And that's another point I think they're trying to show here with all these, with the political or the persecution that has taken, that has become very evident in the past 48 hours, right? They've done worse in municipal and departmental elections than 5 years ago, but it's still not what matters at the end of the day. But
but see, I mean,
I don't know where I'm going with this. I'm extremely frustrated right now,
see, I'm sort of an extremist, and I admit that. But then I think they are extremists too. You know, I mean, on the one hand, when you mentioned, because I've read Julio's thesis about this, you know, or hypothesis, you know, that everything starts on the referendum of 2016. For us, in our view, because the impediment was constitutional. Right. He couldn't have been reelected because of a constitutional impediment. So that impediment had to be overrun and with some legal trick or whatever, you know, and they did it. You know, they were the owners of justice, so they went to the Constitutional Tribunal, and the Constitutional Tribunal wrote a whole thesis about why he should have, under what terms he could legally be a candidate again. So they did it. And of course, we didn't buy that because we're Democrats. You know, we believe, we may not be theorists about democracy. You know, we're not reading books every day, but we have the feeling of democracy. We are free people, like most people in the world. You know, people in the world are not reading about Stuart Mill or whatever. You know, they just feel free. They want to elect somebody different every 4 years or every 5 years. So they do it, and that's democracy for them. You don't need to be a big philosopher for that. But, you know, these guys also don't need to be big philosophers. All they know is that a revolution takes place under one leader, not 2 leaders, because that's revolution. You know, revolution doesn't have to do with the change of the leaders. It doesn't have to do with election. It has to do with the course of history, with the policies that are involved within this.
Why the insistence of emphasizing having recovered democracy? Because they do. They love to say Bolivia recovered democracy the day that Lucho Arce was elected, or Bolivia recovered. Why do they need that?
Because what's democracy for them is not what's democracy for you. Okay, for them, Bolivia is democratic from 2006 on, not before. Because before 2006, there were 2 problems for them. One, The people that were leading the country were the elite.
2006 is when Evo won his first election. Yeah. Just so people who don't know know.
Yeah. Why? Because they sustained that the people that governed Bolivia before were an elite, a white elite, that not only were disregarding the needs of the majority of indigenous ancestry, they were their exploiters. They were racists, and as racists and rich people, they wanted to exploit those Indians, and that cannot be a democracy. You know, how can you sustain the theory that in Bolivia there was a democracy previous to 2006 if there was a white elite governing the big majority of indigenous people in Bolivia and exploiting them because they were so poor? That's not sustainable. There was not a democracy there. And two, not only there was a national elite doing that, this was a national elite intervened by the Americans, intervened by the British, intervened by the Germans, because they were all here with their enterprises, exploiting our gas, exploiting our natural resources, and leaving us nothing, leaving us nothing, poverty, only benefiting this ridiculously small elite in Bolivia. So that's not democracy. Democracy only comes to Bolivia with Evo because he's the revolutionary. So democracy only can be believable after January 22nd of 2006. Before that, it doesn't happen. But see, it's hard for them to do it because life is not what you want it to be. That's it, even in our individual point of view, you can't do everything that you set out to do in life because there are deviations in every point that you take. And for them, there are. And when you mention, for example, the fact that this is away from Julio's hypothesis, when you mention that they still have a majority because they won with 50+% of the vote last year, yes, but a revolution is not 50% of the vote. A revolution is everybody except the small elite. Under the Marxist point of view and the historical materialism, you have the proletariat, which are the big majority, the big majority of the people overtaking government and stating the dictatorship of the proletariat. But see, that's a valid dictatorship because it's more morally valid because the ones that are the dictators are the exploited ones. Against who? Against a very tiny minority, which were the exploiters before. So when you have a 50% vote, it's not happening. It's not revolutionary. In order for it to be revolutionary, you would need 95% of the vote. And that's a revolution. But with 50% or 52%, you're not a revolutionary. You're in the midst of a democratic process. They don't like that. They accept power because they want it. But once they have the seat, again, they're facing, do we go with the rules of a democracy when we only have 52% of the vote, or do we go with the rules of Marxism and the revolution? So that's every day, every morning they wake up and they say, where are we going on this whole process? And when the elections of the municipalities and the governorships take place, they're playing our democracy, they're playing liberal democracy, but they want the result, a revolutionary result, because they're in the middle of it, And when you listen De La Quintana speak to the audience in that video that you saw yesterday or the day before, that's it. He's saying exactly that. He's saying, well, this is a revolution. There's still, when people think that there's no colonialism in the world, they're wrong, because there's still colonialism. The British are still colonialists, and he brings his paper and shows it to you. He said, this guy's intervened in the process, and they wanted our lithium because that's the way to dominate us, because that's the way they become richer every day with our lithium, and leaving us nothing. So that's my feeling of this whole thing. If they could, they would undertake the revolution. They can't, because they have a very big theoretical problem here in terms of politics. When Marx wrote, and Lenin did the revolution, and all these theories of Marxism write, they always write about the bourgeoisie versus the proletariat. Who is the proletariat? The workers. Where are the workers? They're not peasants, and that's very clearly distinguished in Marxism. Peasants are people that do not have a revolutionary mindset. Peasants are people that work in the fields, and they don't necessarily have a revolutionary mindset, because the peasants are not being exploited by the owner of the means of production. It's in the cities where you have the exploited people. It's in the cities where the owners of the means of production are located. That's where the big enterprises are. But in the cities, these people are losing. It's in the cities and the proletariat of the cities that's making them lose the elections. And so they have a dramatic analysis there, you know, because all they're doing is they're getting the support of the peasants, not of the proletarians in the cities, not of the workers. The workers are not with them. So even though they have 51% of the vote or the support, they know that 51% of the vote is not revolutionary. It's a peasantry, and the peasants are not revolutionaries, except that in the Russian Revolution, they interpret it as, oh yeah, it can happen. But for Marx and for Engels, that couldn't have happened. Even Marx said, you know, the revolution could never take place in Russia, because Russians haven't gotten yet to capitalism. The revolution has to take place in Britain or in Germany, because these are the capitalist countries, and that's where the oppressed are, not in the peasantry of Russia. But it did happen, and then the new Marxists started interpreting that peasants could really be revolutionaries. But that's still, well, like we are the essence of the Chapari revolutionaries. No, they're the biggest capitalists in this country, you know, because that's the way it is. They're owners. They own the means of production. They own the land. So yeah, they don't have it easy. But I'm sure that Evo Morales, every day that he wakes up, he wishes he would be Fidel Castro in Cuba, or Maduro or Chavez in Venezuela, or Ortega in Nicaragua, because that's his dream. And he wants his dream to become true, but it's very hard for him to do that. But he doesn't give up, you know.
No, he doesn't.
He still does everything in order to conquer that dream.
But it seems like his I don't know where he's going to get. I don't know how he's going to, you know, how he's going to get that back. I see a clear, from where I sit, a clear resentment towards him by a huge majority of it, you know, in the cities. Unquestionably, you know, he's not such a popular character within his party. And again, we've talked about this before. He took 40-some% in October 2019, whereas Arce took 55%. Within his own party, as the party leader now, he can't even name candidates, because, you know, in Potosí, he had to go into hiding for 3 hours in an attic and then disguise himself to get out safely in a mass meeting to designate local candidates. And this is something that played out 3 or 4 times in different localities in the country. He's not the same anymore, not even within his party. Right. Not even within his party. There are people, I talked to my buddy, I have a friend who lives in Chimoré the other day. Chimoré being in the heart of the
revolution.
The revolution, and that's the mass stronghold. There's nowhere where masismo, or whatever you want to call it, I don't know if there's a word in English for masismo, massism, is stronger than in Chimoré, Bolivia. And I asked him, I said, you know, hey, is Evo still what he was before? And his answer basically was that in that area, there are people who aren't sympathizers, who aren't, but they're tremendously afraid to speak out publicly or say anything negative about it. But basically, yes, in that part of the country, yes, but that's not the rest of the country. I just don't, I think his time is up. If he runs again, I don't see him doing as well as before. I can't see it happening. But that also depends on if the opposition gets its shit together or not, because we've seen an opposition that's been totally inept. The situation going into October in 2019, where Carlos Mesa gave Evo Morales a run for his money and would have won in a runoff, I'm pretty sure that's unquestionable. That's very difficult for that to repeat itself in the circumstances where, like we were talking before, Bolivians love to leave things and wait until the last minute to do anything. And it was our last opportunity to steer the country away from what was basically a dictatorship, having Evo Morales as basically president for life at that point. There would have been no turning back. And that's what happened. People reacted at the last second and steered us away from that. And everything that happened from that point forward, from October 19th or 20th, afterwards, was a combination of different events that took us to where we are now, right? It's very hard, at least on an election day, for that situation to kind of repeat itself. If Evo runs again, I don't think he has the same force, strength, support, whatever, that he had 5 years ago. And the issue, I guess, at the end of the day, is for there to be an organized and competent opposition, and somebody who can also penetrate the rural voting bases, you know, because that's where they're losing all the time, and that's probably what decided this last election as well. I don't know. It's right now I'm really concerned, and I don't know what's going to happen with this political persecution, what's been happening over the last couple of days. I'd like to think that people will protest en masse and do what they have to do to get the government to back down. But I don't know if that's going to happen. I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen right now. My inclination is to say that this isn't a last minute situation like October 2019 was. And so things are just going to slowly, maybe not so slowly, play out in the MAS's favor and in Luis Arce's favor and Evo Morales' favor until we find ourselves in a situation that's maybe we can turn back from, maybe we can't, but I don't think that's going to happen over this weekend or in the next few days, unfortunately.
Yeah, I hope so. I hope you're right. I really hope you're right.
You hope I'm wrong. I don't think we're going to see people react.
Yeah.
Sadly.
Yeah.
I wish I was wrong. Or I hope I'm wrong. But
I know that politics is beyond books, but sometimes we have no other source to understand politics. There are two books I'm going to mention to you as a result of this conversation. One is Gulag Archipelago from this Russian Solzhenitsyn. Solzhenitsyn. It's an old book, and I, of course, people that are not my age, that are younger, that was not a must for them to read because you guys are too young. But it's not a bad idea for you to grab the book and read it. Not the whole book, because it's very boring, and I guarantee you that very few people have gone through the whole thing.
Believe it or not, I recall excerpts of it from high school literature, and
right.
I don't know about college, but I did have a high school English.
Right. So, but yeah, grab it again, because your view is different than when you were a high school student. I just find that I find that book a very enlightening book, much more so from the psychological perspective than the political perspective, because Solzhenitsyn tries to describe a political situation. He has success out of it because it's a good book. It's a novel, really. You know, he writes it very good and very fluently, and like all Russians that are poets or literature guys. You know, he's just fantastic at it. He does a good job, you know, but it's very long and non-recommendable for people that lot. Nowadays you want to read things very
I'm sure there's a condensed version that can be had.
Yeah, but you know, there's one thing here that is very important, and I think that's for me, that is the more important part of the book. You know, he just shows you how Russians during the Stalin era, more sooner than later, you know, they became convinced that this was invincible and they couldn't do anything about it, you know. And there are some examples that are just hilarious, you know. When the guy felt that he was being eyed by the state, that he was being followed because he felt that the state perceived that he was traitor to the revolution.
Told me about this. He turned himself in without having done anything.
They turned themselves in, yeah, because they couldn't stand it, you know. They knew they would lose it, you know, and you know, that's the behavior of people, you know, because they know that it's over. So why fight against this guy? You know, it just take me to the tundras of the Siberia, and let's see what happens after that. But I can't live in Santa Cruz feeling that I'm being persecuted. You just take me wherever you have to take me. And that was, to me, the most important part. In another book that was enlightening on the same way, but in a different, of course, in a different manner, there's this recent book that was written by Bolton, I mentioned to you, The Room Next Door. He's also very good, you know. He's an extremist, but he's very good, you know. And he has a chapter about Venezuela and Trump, you know. And when he describes the situation in Venezuela, you know, he seemed very convinced that the regime was going to fall, and the one that was not convinced was Trump. You know, that's interesting because one would think that Trump would have been convinced that the Venezuelan guy would fall, that Maduro would fall. Trump was the only guy in his team that didn't think so. Basically, because Trump sustained.
We're talking about the situation when Juan Guaido proclaimed himself president, and there was a
couple of years ago when he was still trying to do it, you know. And basically, you know, the argument, Trump's argument is that this guy has balls, you know. Maduro has balls. Guaido doesn't. It's very hard to do it, you know, when the guy that's trying to do it is not fearless enough. And we have to accept Maduro is a very strong guy. You know, he's willing to do anything to remain in power. You know, if you show him the law, he'll break the law, throw it to the basket, and keep on walking because he's not discussing the law with anybody. You know, and he has to kill. He kills, and because he's convinced of the revolution again. You know, it's very hard to deal with people that are obsessed with a line of thought, and revolutionaries are like that. You know, and it's just funny because Bolton describes this whole thing, and then he says, you know, at the end, yeah, we lost it because there was no way to win with Maduro, because apparently they had penetrated the armed forces. When I say they, it's the CIA, basically.
Yeah.
Apparently they did penetrate, but never enough, because when Maduro knew or felt that such and such guy was being penetrated by the CIA, he just went to the guy, either killed him or gave him money or whatever, and that was it, you know. And he was successful because people like Solzhenitsyn relates in his book, The Archipelago, many years ago. People are scared, you know. And when people are scared and they fear Maduro, forget the CIA, you know. Who is going to harm me here? Not the CIA. You know, Maduro is going to kill me here. So slowly but surely, all these people that previously were with the policy of, you know, leading Maduro and having Guaido as president, these people started sliding away from the quote unquote coup d'etat in Venezuela, and they went right back under Maduro's governing situation. So it's the same thing, you know. It's just fear, you know. These people play with fear, and with fear, you don't play democracy, because when people have fear of their life, they would do anything to remain alive, and they would vote against. They would. If there are elections under fear in Bolivia, that's what I'm trying to tell you. If there are elections under fear in Bolivia, forget about the tribunal, the electoral tribunal. Forget about the jurados electorales in every mesa. Forget about everything. The system doesn't work that way. When there's fear, they will win. And they will win with 100% of the votes, because that's the way fear exerts its power over people, you know. And then and they know it, and Evo knows that, and that's what he's trying to do. He's trying to reach to that point, you know, because even in Santa Cruz, where Evo had trouble getting and still has trouble getting, look at the people that followed him here. Even some big shots in Santa Cruz, the owners of big businesses here, they were under him because they feared him, you know, and they were obedient.
There's probably an element of fear, and there's also an element of self-interest. They don't care about political color; they care about their bottom line. And who you know,
they were probably both, because they are under money, but they also under life. You know, they want life. They want to live in order to enjoy their money, and yeah, very clearly they were just they were masistas and evistas, you know, because Evo provided them both things. You know, he provided business and he provided life. So that was your only choice there. He's playing that card. I think Evo's still playing that card, and the people that are around here, which are the same guys that were in government then, are playing the same card. And I just see that Luis Arce is not really a strong president. He does whatever these people tell him to do, and slowly, and he tries to not contradict them, at least, you know. Hard. And as you say, the only thing we have to trust is the opposition, that the opposition realizes what's happening and finally goes to the streets and defends democracy, and the leaders undertake a risk, because this is risky, and do it as they did in October 2019. Mr. Camacho is not a saint of my devotion, like they say in Spanish, but I do accept one thing about him, you know. He really is fearless, you know. He did it. I don't know if they paid money or whatever, but money doesn't give you life, you know. And what he did in October of 2019 was very risky, you know, when he went to the Alcos and he was facing all those guys in the airport. He was risking his life. As I say, even if he did pay the people, even if all these policemen were under his payroll, the people out in the streets were not under payroll.
No.
And he could have gotten killed there, but he did it. And that and that's something that's a plus for him, you know, because he's not a saint of my devotion, but he's a leader that can face these things. And in these situations, you need people like that, because that's the only people that can lead situations like this. A real Democrat, you know, that is too concerned with laws and how things should be done, probably is not a good idea now, because this is the time for action and for people that are fearless, and they just go out to the streets and do whatever needs to be done, you know, expose their lives, as they do it in Venezuela, but they don't have success, you know. This Leopoldo guy, he's been in jail, and he's been running away from Venezuela now because he's like Camacho, you know, but without success.
I guess we'll see. I think it's a good. I think it's a good note to end on, and we'll see how this plays out until next week. Keep our fingers crossed.
Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah, I think that, no, of course, I'm with democracy, and I hope that democracy finally overtakes the revolutionary dreams of these people. But yes, it's concerning. I'm concerned about the whole situation. I hope that it doesn't take another 14 years in order for people to go out to the streets. That 14 years is too long for us. Yeah.
Have a good weekend, everybody.
You too. Have a good time.
Okay.
Enjoy your weekend.
Bye-bye.